Talking about Bills injury news, you get tired of it, and I'm sure the Bills are tired of it and the fans are tired of it, but here we are, more injury news for the Bills taking center stage this week as the Bills get ready to take on the Steelers for preseason game number 2. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast.
And I am Andy Young on the road at a hotel in Pittsburgh. And Kevin, for Matt Milano, it is deja vu all over again.
And this is a tough pill to swallow, Andy, because up until last year, Milano was pretty much injury-free for most of his career. Now we have him missing most of last season, and now he's going to miss most of this season with a torn bicep. That from what we heard from Sean McDermott, there will be surgery involved, and at the earliest, maybe looking at a December return, if that.
Yeah, that was the reports that came out was December. Possibly they're eyeing a return for him. Head coach Sean McDermott would not say definitively when they thought Milano could return. He said it was too early. That may have been just what he wanted to say to the media as they were kind of dealing with the shock of the whole thing. You could tell that the Bills and Sean McDermott were very downtrodden about what happened with Matt Milano because he had worked so hard to come back from that devastating leg injury, the broken leg suffered in Week 5 last season in October in London against the Jacksonville Jaguars, just to get back to training camp, and had been working his way back and had been a pleasant surprise to actually suit up and practice in individual drills during mandatory minicamp in June. Then he's practiced for the most part throughout training camp, and then in the preseason opener did not play, had a veteran rest day there, but optimism was high that Matt Milano was going to be ready to go for the regular season and be the Matt Milano that he was previously. Now, do we know that? We're not sure because he's coming back from a major injury, but that's an all-pro player who the Bills had really penciled in to look forward to being next to Terrell Bernard and forming a really dynamic duo, athletic, yet undersized at the linebacker position that we saw them really succeed at times during the first 4 or 5 weeks last season until Milano was injured. And Deion Dawkins was a guy who was very upset about this. We actually informed him on the field after practice here in Pittsburgh, and he was unaware that Milano was going to be out indefinitely with this injury. So obviously a tough situation for the Bills, and somebody else is going to have to step up, which is the nature of the beast in the NFL. But you could tell by the way some of the players talked and the way McDermott handled his pre-practice press conference with the media that they're feeling for Matt Milano, and they're not real happy about what happened here, and it hurts them.
Now, I can't remember if Sean McDermott said this or if I heard it somewhere else, but I thought that, like, how this injury happened is another one of those, what the tackling a tackling dummy and it happens is just one of those things, Andy, when you hear it, or if you were at practice and you saw it, you're like, this can't happen. We understand during a game at full speed and contact, but anyone who's played football, watched the football practice, see over and over again hitting these tackling dummies, I've never heard of this happening in that scenario before. Usually it's something that happens during a game when there's stress on that muscle or lifting weights or something towards that effect. But hitting a stuffed dummy, tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly the word that Sean McDermott used. He said this is what makes it a harder pill to swallow because it's just a freak accident. Like, you can't control that. That wasn't something that happened in the course of play. It wasn't happened when he was trying to wrap up a player, or even to the extent of it didn't happen while he was weight training, right? Like, you hear of accidents like that. It's just one of those things where the muscle gave out on him when he's, wrapping up on a tackling dummy during practice, during like individual drills on a random Tuesday in August at the team facilities in Orchard Park. And it's going to cost him a whole lot of time. And it's certainly a setback for the Bills defense because this is a guy who, when he's on the field and when he's healthy, is one of the best linebackers in the entire NFL. Now, was he going to be exactly where he was before he was injured? We don't know, but they were certainly hoping so.
And as they say in all of sports and life, in any job, Next man up, Andy. That's what you hear in tough situations like this. And one of the next men up looks to be Dorian Williams, second-year linebacker out of Tulane. The Bills picked up in the third round a couple of years ago, who did see playing time in 17 games last season. But this is a lot now going to be put on his shoulders in his second season with the Bills.
Ask Taron Johnson, who's kind of the veteran, grizzled old man in that defensive secondary right now. Is he ready? Is he prepared? And he said, I think he's ready. This is not like it's the first time he's ever played football. He's going to go in there and play, and he's been preparing for it. He did get some time last season when Milano was injured, and they used a combination of guys there, and Tyrell Dodson and Dorian Williams. Williams had some growing up to do as far as playing the linebacker position at the NFL level, but he thinks he's ready. He said point blank, I've learned a lot. I've learned from the veterans. I've learned from Milano. I've learned from Terrell Bernard, and we're going to work together to make this happen. He's a really fast, athletic kind of guy. There are times where he kind of bites on the play action fakes, and there's some issues in coverage there, but he tries to make up for it with his athleticism. If he's learned a little bit more about how to take attack angles, how to not bite on certain play action fakes from the quarterback, that's going to help him a lot, because the Bills like their athletic, fast linebackers, always have, even dating back to Tremaine Edmonds, who was the prototype for what you'd want in a linebacker because he's so big, plus the speed.
Right.
Now the Bills have some undersized guys, but Dorian Williams isn't vastly undersized, and he's very quick, and he's athletic. He's going to have to go out there and prove it. There are some other candidates in-house who could supplant him if he struggles. Balin Spector, who's nicked up a little bit and not practiced yesterday here in Pittsburgh. He's a guy who could come in and play. He's also a second-year linebacker. They have Deion Jones, who's a veteran. Nicholas Morrow, who's been hurt, is here as well as Eddie Olafoshio, the rookie, who's been banged up as well, but have returned to the practice field. So they've got some guys here that they think can do the job. Of course, you're not replacing Matt Milano if Matt Milano is the Matt Milano we all remember prior to that injury. But maybe the drop-off isn't that bad, especially if Milano was going to have to ease his way into this. So if you're looking for some optimism out there, Bills fans, think about the second-year leap that Terrell Bernard took from year one to year two, from his rookie season to becoming the starting middle linebacker on this team last season, and hope that the Bills and their linebackers coaches and Bobby Babich, who was the linebackers coach, now as defensive coordinator, can kind of get sort of the same thing out of Dorian Williams. And then you've got a guy who can be at least serviceable and not a complete drop-off from Matt Milano.
Andy, you almost stole my thunder there, but I let you finish. You didn't get there. I wanted to get into, because you mentioned Taron Johnson too. When you look at some of the work the Bills have done under head coach Sean McDermott, I mean, you want to think positive, and I'm a positive kind of thinker. I mean, you look at Matt Milano himself, drafted in the 5th round, became a star in the NFL. You look at Taron Johnson, drafted in the 4th round, Andy. The Bills developed him into the best slot corner, or one of them in the league. Terrell Bernard, 3rd round pick, just like Dorian Williams, comes on strong. I'll even go, you mentioned Tremaine Edmonds. Came in as a rookie, be it a top pick, but they still got him up to speed right quick, Andy. So this Bills coaching staff has the history of being able to take guys not taken in the 1st and 2nd round and getting them up to speed and getting them to perform at a high level. So there's no reason to think that that can't happen with Dorian Williams.
Obviously, when you take a linebacker 2 years in a row in the 3rd round, you think they're going to have some ability to play and you're going to be able to develop them. Like, you look at what they did with Bernard, right? And that obviously had ideas. The Bills organization had ideas that maybe they were going to lose Tremaine Edmonds at the time, and this was going to be a potential heir apparent. Then the very next year, and you always say we draft for best player available, not for need. They didn't necessarily need another 3rd round linebacker in Dorian Williams, but they take him because they like his traits and they like his upside. And, Milano is still a younger guy, but he's getting up there in age now in terms of NFL experience. I mean, he came in 2017 in that very first draft class of Sean McDermott. So, you got to plan for the future after Matt Milano at some point. And, he's gotten hurt a couple of times now. And you've got a guy in Dorian Williams that they've been grooming and working to get him in position to be able to be one of those players. The problem to me lies in this. Remember last season, like they had all, some similar guys and replacement players available. The depth just falls off when you take Matt Milano away and then you force Dorian Williams, who's his primary backup, into the lineup. Then you're starting to worry about your depth at the position. And then you lose those guys, and you saw Terrell Bernard go out last season, and you ended up with A.J. Klein coming out of basically retirement.
I was going to say, does A.J. Klein get a call?
Right. So he just announced his retirement, too, which is just, incredible.
Call him up.
The world is crazy sometimes. But you worry about the depth there a little bit, but they did go out and bring in a couple of guys in Deion Jones and Nicholas Morrow. I told you about Adefuan Olafosio, the rookie. So they've kind of tried to rebuild the depth at that position, but certainly losing Milano doesn't help both on the field currently and your depth long term here.
Do you think the sky is falling now? Do you think this has such a big impact on the Bills? Because I don't. We saw that they were able to overcome this last season and get into the playoffs, and a tough loss to the Chiefs. I think that's the big game where the injuries just were too much for the Bills to overcome, Andy. But I don't think that Milano being out is the end of the world at this point. And I think you can still be pretty optimistic that the defense, with all the other players on that defensive unit, maybe stepping up and helping a little bit more and doing a little bit more, should maybe keep this thing on track or close to on track.
I mean, I don't have those sort of analytics in front of me, but you hear guys talk about like what is a all-pro linebacker worth in terms of like wins per season, right? Like, I don't think it's so bad. It's not like you lost Josh Allen, right? Like, that would be a major blow. So, yes, Matt Milano is an excellent player, one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL, and has proven that time and time again. However, to your point, I don't think the sky is falling. I don't think he makes so much of a difference that it costs the Bills multiple wins throughout the season. Now, if they get down the depth chart and it's Chiefs time and you got to try to cover Travis Kelce with like guys off the street, no offense to A.J. Klein, who's been a serviceable player in the NFL, but he had just come in, right? He's not Matt Milano and he's not Terrell Bernard. Then you're looking at some problems. But over the course of a long season, I don't think the wins probabilities that losing Matt Milano takes away is going to do anything to really affect how the Bills were going to be long term. If the Bills defense was going to stink or be really good, it won't be markedly better or worse because of this loss of Matt Milano, even as good of a player as he is.
So let's play out this scenario, Andy. Get your thoughts on this. Dorian Williams, serviceable at the position throughout the year, does well. Matt Milano, is his future with the Bills in jeopardy at this point, a la Tre'Davious White, with just back-to-back years with the injury? I know a lot of Bills fans that I've talked to have mentioned to me this is probably another Tre'Davious White scenario.
I'm going to pull up his contract here briefly as we vamp a little bit. I mean, he's signed through 2026. His dead cap, if they were to release him next season, is $17+ million. So I mean, that's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. That's really a lot. So I don't know. I mean, I don't see it. He's got a couple more years left. He's 29 right now. He'll be 31 when the contract ends. I mean, maybe he gets back this season. I don't think it's quite the same injury as last year. So, I mean, you never say never. Like, we never thought they were going to take on a $31 million cap hit with Stephon Diggs and trade him, right?
Right.
But it can happen. So I'll never say never. I wouldn't expect that to be the case.
Cool.
But it's certainly possible.
Cool. Let's get to the joint practice, Andy. Hitting someone in a different uniform, we hear it every summer. So I'm going to skip over that part because every NFL player says that all the time. But always concerns, Andy, with fights breaking out when you have these joint practices. Like everyone behaved themselves down in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think that was part of the message from Mike Tomlin, Steelers head coach, and Sean McDermott, Bills head coach, who are former college teammates and go way back and know each other really well, that's not going to be acceptable. That's not going to be the kind of work we want to get in here, and that you'll be out if you start a fight. So there weren't really any scrums. You saw a couple little pushing and shoving. That's normal. I mean, you're playing football, right?
Right.
It wasn't heavy tackle, so that kind of eliminated that as well, right? They weren't like actually wrapping up. They had pants on, their football pants, but nobody was like wearing pads or anything like that. They had shoulder pads and helmets. So the idea here wasn't like an intense practice. It was more about a work intense practice, like the types of things you're trying to do, not necessarily the physicality. So we didn't see any of that, which was good. And I was watching some of the local Pittsburgh television sportscasts here, and the Pittsburgh players all said like, we didn't want to go there. We're trying to be smart about it. We're going to play these guys 2 days later on Saturday in the preseason game. So, like, no need to go out there and start fights and do stupid things.
I think the Steelers already fought with each other anyways earlier in training camp because of something right. Russell Wilson did. Josh Allen, from following you on Twitter and reports and whatnot, looked good. Dalton Kincaid and the other tight ends, not including Dawson Knox, who was out yesterday, pretty impressive in this joint practice.
Yeah, Josh Allen had some really nice throws. I can bring up a particular sequence when they were doing some drills where against the Steelers, Allen hit a dart to Kincaid, another dart to Kincaid on a corner route along the sidelines, and then an absolute strike down the seam for a touchdown to Khalil Shakir. Just one of those throws that's a Josh Allen classic where it's just on a rope, perfectly placed.
Mm-hmm.
Shakir hauls it in. And Shakir and Kincaid, I mean, those are just your two most reliable targets day in and day out. I feel like a broken record, but when you watch practice and you go through training camp, I mean, those guys are just there all the time. Other guys flash, and the other guys show signs and have moments, but I'm telling you, and they're on the field often together. Like, we've had some discussions among us as colleagues in the Bills press corps about, do those two guys eat into each other's targets because they both kind of play a similar slot position? But I think they're going to be on the field together quite a bit. And I think that when they go to two tight end, two wide receiver kind of sets, that like you're going to see Shakir and Kincaid on the field at the same time sometimes, or you'll see Kincaid and Dawson Knox. I think Khalil Shakir is going to be on the field a whole ton. And I'm starting to think that if it's not Kincaid, that it's probably going to be Shakir who leads this team in catches because, I mean, he's just consistent. He's open. Josh Allen looks for him. And remember last season, once they got him cooking, Allen looked his way quite a bit, and his catch percentage led the NFL last season. So when Allen looks his way and throws the ball to Khalil Shakir, almost 9 times out of 10, literally, Shakir pulls in the football. So, I mean, another impressive performance there. Another tight end we talked about was Quentin Morris, who's really started to come on. Got those second unit reps or the second tight end reps with the first team, with Dawson Knox getting a day off and had a nice play and a couple of nice catches. So he's come on as well. Zach Davidson continues to show that he's got some juice there. So it wouldn't surprise me now, especially after the wide receiver changes, Chase Claypool getting an injury settlement, if maybe they keep 4 tight ends and surprise us all. I wouldn't think that's out of the realm of possibility. So that position has been pretty darn good for the most part.
I just wanted to get back to Shakir for 1 second. It's amazing.
How dare you.
It's amazing, Andy, how time changes. I believe I have a pretty good memory that it was the second preseason game last year. Shakir had a nice catch, and he dropped the ball. And the whole talk was after that game, that is the problem with Khalil Shakir. He's unreliable. He's not consistent. He'll make the great catch for you, but then you always have to worry about him. I think he dropped a ball on like a 3rd and 7. That would have been a first down in a preseason game. But then once the regular season hits and where we are now with him, like you said, he is the most reliable guy as far as hands go.
He's Mr. Consistent. I mean, he's got stick 'em on the gloves or something, right? Because when the ball goes his way, typically he's catching it. So, I mean, he's going to be a major force in this Bills offense, and you see it. He's got more juice than people think. He'll surprise you, and he's a 5th round pick. I mean, I'm not going to compare him to like Diggs, but like Diggs was a 5th round pick too. So like you never know how these guys travel through and make things work and figure it out over the course of a career. But I know that Allen's going to look his way a lot this season. I would be stunned if he's not in the top 2 in catches, whether it's him and Kincaid or him and Curtis Samuel.
Keon Coleman watch, Andy, the rookie, looks like tough start to joint practice, but maybe the rookie getting a handle on things as that practice went along.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the issue with Keon Coleman that we've talked about even going back through the draft process is he's not a great separator. He doesn't get off the line of scrimmage and then like instantly create open plays. Like he's making great catches often, but with guys draped on top of him, just using his body positioning, his athleticism, his vertical jump to go up and get the ball or shield a guy. And you saw some of that both in the preseason game against the Bears and a little bit in the joint practice where he had a little bit of trouble with getting off the line from jam coverage and separating there. And that's kind of going to be something he's going to have to figure out throughout the course of his young career here is how to escape those NFL corners who are just much better at sticking right to you right from the start, especially when they're in man coverage. Because I think in zone, he's capable of, finding that soft spot, especially if it's not jam coverage. He's got to learn to use his physicality a little bit better to get off the coverage, get off the jams, and to create some space for himself on those routes. Deep downfield, you don't see him getting a ton of space that way either, where he goes up and makes those plays, but he still has that incredible knack of being able to make great catches. I think right away he's going to be a big target in the red zone. I think in the end zone, they've shown that. I mean, the Bills looked his way twice in the end zone in that preseason game with the Bears, with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback in the second quarter there. Both of those fell incomplete. So in the joint practice, yeah, you're right. He kind of came on and figured it out a little bit more as time went on. And that's going to be kind of the growing pains for a guy who that's his MO, right? He comes as advertised. And so far we've seen exactly what Keon Coleman came in as advertised.
Any other things from the joint practice, Andy, that stuck out to you? I know you did mention Ray Davis in one of your notes about the joint practice yesterday.
Yeah, Davis is a guy who came in with the ability to catch the football and scored 21 touchdowns last season at Kentucky, and I think 7 of those were through the air. And I've been really impressed with him in the passing game. It remains to be seen exactly how much he's going to be used. Ty Johnson had been out throughout a whole chunk of training camp with an injury, but Ty Johnson came back and got some of those second reps behind James Cook. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But I really think Ray Davis could be an asset on third downs, in the screen game. He's got a little juice in route running, that sort of thing. So I'm interested to see how this Bills offense and how Joe Brady and Josh Allen potentially utilize Ray Davis.
Talk a lot about how the offense performed in this joint practice. Anything stand out to you from the defensive side of the ball?
Daquan Hardy continues to really impress me in his cornerback role. The rookie out of Penn State, known mostly as a return man, and Sean McDermott even said, that's a big reason we drafted him was his return ability. But he's shown time and time again that he's got some juice, both as a slot corner, which is where he's mostly projected, and on the depth chart, he's listed as the second slot corner right now behind Taron Johnson. But he also has done some outside corner work, and I saw him with a really nice pass breakup and some one-on-one drills with the Steelers. And he's a guy who, if he continues to do that, and he's got that ability in the return game, they need to get him some more reps there as he kind of battles with KJ Hamler and Ty Johnson and some other guys, Andy Isabella, for that return role, whether that's punt returns or kick returns. Oftentimes they're not the same guy. We'll see how the Bills play that throughout the season. But if he's able to continue to show what he's shown on defense and be that backup slot corner and have a shot to, be the return man, I think that's a boon for the Bills.
All right. While we're recording this, Andy, we're not clear on how Sean McDermott is going to handle playing time in the preseason game coming up on Saturday night with the Steelers. We do know that Tomlin has said that Russell Wilson will indeed be playing against the Bills, but we're unclear exactly what the Bills are going to do. I know we joked around about, Josh Allen taking off and running with the ball against the Bears probably led to McDermott saying, we don't need any of that. We're good at this point. But it's unclear right now. I don't think it's necessary. I think the work that needs to be done are not the players in the starting lineup come opening day.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We know that McDermott thought it was important to get guys out in that first game because of all the new faces and relatively new coordinators on both sides of the ball to get the starters some work. Josh Allen got the quarter. Some of the other starters went a little bit further into the second quarter, and that drive continued there. I don't know. I don't levy a prediction. I don't think it's necessary either. You don't want to get any more guys banged up, but you never know. McDermott said he had a plan in mind, didn't want to say exactly what it was, especially before the joint practice, because McDermott talked with reporters prior to the joint practice, whereas Tomlin talked with reporters after the joint practice. So then you can say, all right, here are my guys who were banged up. Did we have any injuries? That sort of thing, and kind of finalize that decision. So I don't think we're going to see all the starters play a ton, but it wouldn't completely stun me if some of them played. And I have no idea what he's going to do.
All right, let's do a little 3 and out. Just my curiosity. Again, while we're recording this, there's no actual news here, but Brandon Ayuk to the Steelers, Andy. Was there any talk about that while you guys were out at the practice yesterday?
Yeah, there's some chit-chat around town about what's happening with that, and that the process seems to keep dragging on, and then the tune changes. First it's, all right, yeah, it's a done deal, and then it's he's going to go back to San Francisco, and then it's, he posts things on social media. So that thing is a mess, and people are kind of like, all right, let's just, get this over with. If he's going to be traded here, do it. If he's not, let's move on, and here's our team for this season. So that's interesting. It sounds like the 49ers, from the reports I've read, want to get back like a big-time player in return as well as a pick. Like, if you're the Steelers, are you trading George Pickens or somebody else on your defense at this point in the season to get Ayuk? I don't know if they'd be willing to do that. Draft picks, sure. But, we'll see.
All right. You still headed to Top Golf, or are you going back to bed?
Little late start here this morning for me after a couple rough nights of sleep, getting adjusted here. But, Top Golf, Bills Media golf outing is actually going to be at Top Golf for some of the folks who travel down here in Pittsburgh, and, that's a good time. Usually they do a media golf tournament. Kevin and I and some of our other colleagues typically play in that every year. It's usually in June around minicamp. That didn't work out this year for whatever reason. So, the Bills have invited us to come to Top Golf and have some fun and hang out a little bit.
All right. Speaking of golf, we had Shooter McGavin on earlier in the week as we launched our Buffalo Bills Celebrity Fan podcast. We're going to hit you up with every now and then. You and I asked when they were going to start shooting Happy Gilmore 2, right? And we did not get an answer. Later on that day, it was announced shooting is going to be in New Jersey October and November, and there's an open casting call for extras, Andy. I went right online. I put myself in, sent some headshots. I could be a big-time actor someday soon, Andy. Good call by me. You think I'm going to get picked to be an extra in Happy Gilmore 2 or what?
I mean, I think you're an excellent actor. You've been playing the role of a sports anchor for years.
Thank you. You're not too far off, Andy.
I love you, buddy. I'm just busting your chops. Yeah, I mean, hey, maybe they'll cast you an extra and realize the amount of immense talent you have as an actor, and then you'll have a role. Like you can be the Vern Lundquist of Happy Gilmore 2.
Ah, okay.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Because I told Chris McDonald before he left the other day I could be the caddy he fires like he did in the first one, but that'll remain to be seen. I'm not calling in any favors just because we had him in as a guest back on earlier in the week. Andy, we usually
That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a blast. He's so entertaining to talk to, a lot of good information and a lot of, for me at least, going back through the history of his film catalog was kind of fun too, to go over all the films he did. That brings us to what are you watching that we normally do. I'm assuming you're not really watching much with how busy you've been.
I've really thrown a wet blanket on this what you watching segment.
So I'm changing it to what's got your attention right now, Andy?
Because you and John both, when John Scott was on this podcast, like you guys both had shows and you'd sit down with your wives and watch these shows, and I don't do that. Like I don't watch a ton of TV anymore. I have a few series. House of the Dragon just ended, which is annoying and wasn't that great of a season for their second season. So that kind of was a wet blanket for me watching that second season because I also read the books and it's not going the way that went. So, just honestly been watching a lot of back of my eyelids, right? Like,
yes.
sleeping in and missing deadlines for podcasts.
Andy was watching the clock go minute by minute overnight and then finally fell asleep.
I'll share this story because it's funny, and Kevin's a good sport. We were supposed to record this podcast at 10 o'clock this morning here on Friday. I'm in Pittsburgh in the hotel. I couldn't get to sleep very well last night. Woke up at like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and couldn't get back to sleep. Finally fell asleep again at like 7 and completely slept through the 10 o'clock podcast time. And I woke up to our photographer, Corey, banging on my hotel room door, doing a welfare check on me because our boss, our managing editor, Steve Marth, had called and texted multiple times. Kevin, you text and called multiple times. And at a certain point, you must have been getting worried because it was like an hour and a half later and I wasn't alive anywhere.
Here's how this goes, Andy, from my end. I messaged you probably at like 8 o'clock this morning because usually you're up by then. Hey, do you want to do the podcast early so I can get out of work early? Nothing.
Good luck with that.
So now I'm sitting here as time goes by, and I'm like, man, I messaged Andy and John last night, never heard back from Andy. I messaged Andy today. I'm like, I think he's just had it with me and is just going to show up for the podcast. Whatever. So then we come in for the podcast. 5 of 10 comes up. You're not there. We're all sitting around joking like, oh, must have been a rough night down in Pittsburgh with all the Bills media people. Andy's nowhere to be seen. To, okay, now Andy's not picking up any of his phones and getting back to anyone.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot to say that part. I have 2 phones, a work phone and a personal phone. You guys called both of those phones, and
right.
I slept right through it. It's remarkable.
So then it's, I message our buddy John, and I'm like, were you out with Andy? And he's like, no, I didn't. I had work to do. And I'm like, well, now the jokes aren't really funny anymore because we're like, this isn't like Andy at all that we can't find him.
Steve, they found me floating in the Ohio River.
Right. So finally we got a hold of Corey. Corey's like, well, I'm out jogging, but when I get back, I'll knock on his door. And meanwhile, we're still sitting here like, okay, jog a little bit faster so you can knock on Andy's door sooner than later. And then, you get the worst case scenario run through your head and then everything's fine and whatever. We were just an hour late and it all worked out.
I'm alive, but when somebody like wakes you up out of a dead sleep like that, and you're just I woke up in this hotel room, and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Someone's banging on my door, and I just yell out, yeah, and he's like, hey, it's Corey. You awake in there? I'm like, holy crap. So my apologies for that, K-Man, and our buddies back at the station who are running things in the background. But I am here. I am alive. I may not be well, but we will be here for the Pittsburgh Steelers Buffalo Bills preseason game on Saturday.
It's the viewers that suffered the most, Andy.
Yeah, that's right. They're suffering as we continue to do this podcast.
Yep. Okay. Preseason game number 2 coming up 7 o'clock on Saturday. Then we'll move forward. Andy and I will be back again next week as we inch closer to the regular season and the preseason finale coming up. Andy, do all that stuff that I don't know how to do. Click,
Anything?
smash.
That's a
What
wide open swath of things you don't know how to do.
What I can't do is chip onto the green if I'm within 100 yards. That is something I cannot do.
That's true.
Yeah.
Before we go, if you're listening or watching us, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on the Buffalo End Zone podcast. Share it with your friends. Tell us how stupid we are in our takes, or have a nice discourse with us. We're wide open to any of those things.
Yeah, and send Andy a wake-up call tomorrow. He's going to be to the game before 7 o'clock, I think. All right, Andy.
I'll post my phone number in the comments.
Thanks for waking up and joining us, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.